meeting or a continuation? Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting to order. This is October 14th, 2021. I'd like to introduce Bob Schwartz from Bowling Green, Carol Hood from Fort Royal, Priscilla Minor, Madam and I'm George Weaver, and I represent Madison. The audience, boy, this thing is loud. In the audience, we have Mike Fincham, who's Director of Planning. We have Chris McKenzie, he's our County Attorney. We have Dave Nunley. Where are you, Dave? There he is, Dave Nunley. He's our Senior Environmental Planner. Craig Pennington, he's our planner, and he's sitting up here with us now. Lisa Zeck, who's the Administrative Assistant and Planning Tech. I'd like now, if you'd all stand up, we can say pledge allegiance, please. That's it. Normally we'd have the approval of the minutes, but we have no minutes at this time. Before we get into this, I'll ask Ms. Zeck to do the protocol. But I would like to thank staff and the commissioners for their hard work during this difficult time, attempting to approve solar energy in Caroline County. So I would like to thank you all. Thank you. Ms. Zeck, can you read the protocol for this meeting, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For tonight's meeting, we just wanted to give you all some guidelines for how the meeting is going to run. The public hearings on the matters for consideration have been closed. Public comment will not be solicited tonight. The next opportunity for the public to address these matters will be at the Board of Supervisors public hearing, date to be determined. Applicant presentation period is also closed, and the same goes for the applicant. Their next opportunity will be at the Board of Supervisors public hearing. However, if any commissioners may ask specific questions of the applicant or a citizen, responses to those questions are limited to the question itself and not an opportunity to engage the commission in discussions unrelated to the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so you understand, now that means that the public hearing has been closed. So now it's basically discussions among staff and commissioners about each one of these projects. So at this time, I'd like to hear from any commissioner who wishes to speak on RZ 06-2021 Earth Development. Is there any discussions, please?
Mr. Weaver, would you like a reading of the conditions?
Absolutely, that'd be fine, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Staff crafted for your consideration and review suggested conditions for SPX 04-2021 CC Solar. Condition number 1, the 2 width for this project shall be reported in the office of the clerk of the court. Number 2, this permit shall be subject to review every 2 years by the Board of Supervisors from the date of approval of this permit until the approval, final inspection, and/or certificate of occupancy. Are we on rezoning or special exception?
Well, at this particular time, we're on RZ 06, which is the rezoning.
Okay, so the conditions don't apply to rezoning, so
That was the question. The rezoning application is part of the special exception, but if the commissioners decide that they're for or against rezoning, then that's going to affect the special exception.
we'll hold the conditions for the next.
So just so the commissioners understand, first part of this application is the rezoning, two pieces of land, which are right next to the 1,600 acres of land that they actually own. And I know that Commissioner Schwartz had something that he wanted to address, so at this particular time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow board commission members. The boundaries for the solar energy overlay district have already been set. First thing out of the box, we're being asked to divert those boundaries. It's a bad practice, even on a temporary basis, because once it's done, it leaves a path for more requests to go outside of the box. I think it's an ill-advised practice, and I will not approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Carol, anything you wish to say at this time?
So how is this going to affect the rest of the special exceptions?
Well,
We need to discuss that.
I believe, and I've spoken to Mr. Fincham, and I believe that we have a right as the commission to either vote yes or no in reference to the RZ 06/2021 application. Now, if we should decide that at this particular time, we would send that on to the commissioners, onto the supervisors, with a denial, then we have the right to do that. Am I correct, Mr. McKenzie?
Can you hear me? Yeah. And Mr. Pennington, let me know if I'm getting this wrong. This isn't, sometimes we have applications where you have to rezone it first in order to get it into a district where the special exception they're seeking exists, right? So the rezoning is kind of a required precedent to the special exception application. That's not the case with this one. The rezoning is to add those two additional parcels, but it is not a precedent to the special exception. You can still have the special exception on the bulk of the property without having rezoned those other two into the district boundary. So it's a little different from how we usually see these.
Okay.
And so I think to your point, Mr. Weaver, you certainly, yes, you can consider them kind of independently, and that the special exception is still very much valid and operational application, even if the rezoning were to be denied. Is that right, Mr. Pennington?
That is correct. If the rezoning were denied, then the special exception could be approved minus the two parcels that the rezoning was required on. 40A22 and 40A22A. They would need to be removed from the special exception if the rezoning was denied.
So now the first thing that I think we're going to have is a motion in reference to the RZ 06/2021.
I had some more questions. So we're talking about, and I don't know why my mic is so loud, I'm trying to turn it down. But we're talking about rezoning, the rezoning 06, that's approximately 20 acres? Okay, but if we deny that, we can proceed with special exception 04, which is,
Because then the only thing we're going to have to do is adjust the special exception 04 to eliminate those two lots if we send them on to the supervisors with a recommendation of denial.
understand,
Okay.
just wanted to clarify that.
Understood? Yeah. So I think the first motion we have to do now is I need a motion in reference to RZ 06/2021 by the commissioner, Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Chairman, Whereas rezoning request RZ 06-2021 for park development, CC Solar is the applicant, appears to be generally inconsistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And whereas the public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practices warrants the denial of this request, I recommend that RZ 06-2021 be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendation of denial.
Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. All those in favor?
And Mr. Weaver, before you call a vote, you can allow discussion of the motion if there is any.
Well,
But if there isn't, you're ready to, you can call a vote. I just wanted to make sure that you're entitled to discuss the motion if you feel the need.
Okay, understood. All right. Does anyone in the commissions want to discuss this application or this motion? No, it's already been seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I know it's a little difficult for all of us because it's a learning procedure, okay? So we're going to try and do the best we can to get through it. All right, so now we're going to go into SPEX 04-2021. You going to tell us, please, Craig?
Yep, sorry, for jumping the gun.
Thank you. I know last time. Now you can tell us, please.
All right, so condition number one for SPX 04-2021, the two which shall be reported in the circuit court within 30 days of receiving final approval. Number two, permit shall be subject to a review every 2 years by the Board of Supervisors from the date of approval of this permit until the approval of the final inspection and/or certificate of occupancy. Number three, special exception permit shall be void upon completion of the decommissioning as set forth in Article 15, Section 23.10 of the zoning ordinance. Number four, site shall be developed in substantial conformance with the development plan prepared by the Timmons Group dated February 17th, 2021, revised August 9th, 2021, except for modifications necessary to address local, state, or federal requirements. Any modifications shall be submitted to the planning director for review and approval prior to submission of the site plan. The director determines that the proposed modification significantly alters the approved development plan. The plan shall be referred back to the Board of Supervisors for review and approval. Number five, the rated nameplate capacity shall be 150 megawatts AC. Prior to the issuance of land disturbance permit, the applicant shall establish an erosion and sediment control inspection fund in the amount determined by the Department of Planning and Community Development to cover third-party ENS inspections retained by the county. Alternatively, the county may accept an equivalent services payment agreement acceptable to the director and the county attorney. Number seven, site grading, post-driving, or other construction activities involving heavy equipment shall be conducted during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and shall not be allowed on Sunday or state or federal holidays. Number eight, notwithstanding the provisions of Article 15, Section 23.9.4, and Chapter 45, Erosion and Sediment Control of the County Code, the Department of Planning and Community Development may require more stringent controls or design standards to address site conditions and ensure there is no adverse impact to wetlands, water bodies, or adjacent properties as determined by the director. Number nine, site development shall not alter the existing external drainage patterns of the property. Notwithstanding the requirements of the DEQ stormwater management permit, the stormwater management shall be designed utilizing multiple integrated stormwater features in lieu of large mass facilities. Number 10, the removal of topsoil from the property is prohibited. Any excess topsoil after site grading shall be used to establish visual buffers or address other requirements of the ordinance. An aerial survey of the perimeter of the site shall be conducted to identify any off-site sedimentation or erosion issues after any rain event producing 1 inch of rain in any 24-hour period. A video of the survey shall be submitted to the planning department. 12, the applicant shall address all issues identified from the approved traffic impact analysis to the satisfaction of the Virginia Department of Transportation, including the routing of construction traffic to and from the site. Number 13, a video of the hauling road shall be taken on a bi-weekly basis to document the road conditions before, during, and after construction and submitted to the planning department. Number 14, a Knox box for emergency access shall be provided at all entrances. Number 15, The fire chief reserves the right to require installation of additional entrances where necessary for emergency vehicle access only. 16, a buffer of 20 feet of grass mowed to 6 inches or less, or planted with a vegetation with a lower flame point than traditional grass, or designed with a non-combustible surface, shall be established and maintained between the panels and ordinance required buffer. Number 17, an emergency vehicle travelway of a minimum of 10 feet in width shall be maintained between pods of panels. Number 18, noise shall be minimized using acceptable industry practices for backup alarms and equipment that do not emit traditional beeping sounds. No loudspeakers or whistles shall be permitted in daily operation unless required for emergency purposes. Number 19, an emergency response plan, which includes emergency shut-off procedures, shall be prepared and submitted to the fire and EMS chief for review and approval. Number 20, site-specific training shall be provided initially upon commencing operation and offered annually to the fire and EMS chief. And number 21, ESD perimeter control measures must be installed, inspected, and approved before upslope disturbance is allowed.
Thank you, Craig. Commissioners, there's one of the items that are listed here, which is item number 7, which is a site grading and post driving. I believe that the amount of hours should be limited during the week, 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, I know Cal had said to me, well, maybe it should be 6 o'clock. I'm open for discussions, but I think I do not like the 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock. I think we're putting a real burden on the people in that area. So I would like to ask that the commissioners revise number 7 to be 8 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock Monday through Friday. I can't do that, can I not? Did that correctly?
Sure, I mean, we just need to make clear whenever a vote is called, what conditions as amended are being voted upon, so I think.
So the commissioners can actually say that's what I do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think right now that the conditions before the commission are what was recited by Mr. Pennington with your proposed amendment to change it to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
That is correct. That would be my amended condition. Any of the commissioners wish to vote a yea or a nay? Mr. Schwartz, what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, what about on Saturday? At least on the paperwork I had, it was 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
No, Saturday is now 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and no work on Sunday. Unless, an emergency arises or something like that. Okay. We have so much paper in front of us, Bob. What are we supposed to be looking at? We had already revised the Saturday from 9 to 5. We feel as if, unless there's a real emergency, that we should not allow work on Sunday, and I would like to, during the week, limit it to 8 to 5. And Carol said to me, well, maybe that's too much limitation, and that's fine.
I would like to see if we approve these projects, I'd like to see them finished, as quickly as possible. So I don't want to limit the hours too much because of that. I mean, I could go along with 8 to 5. I mean, if the other commissioners think that. Also around 5 o'clock, the traffic gets heavy, so I don't know if we want the construction equipment on the road at that time, or I was thinking if you give it a little longer, maybe some of the work traffic will be gone.
You're possibly right, Carol, except some of these locations, especially in the location for this facility, and it's out in the middle of Never Neverland. Okay, you've been there, and we've all been to that site. Okay, that's a huge piece of land, and I don't think if we let that traffic out of there at 5 o'clock, I don't think it's going to affect any of that roadway course, the gentleman who's working that piece of land now, I mean, he cuts down those trees and moves them out anytime he can. So I don't think taking 3 hours a day away from them is going to hurt them as far as how long it's going to take them to develop this. Because they told us at least 14 months to develop this. So let's say it takes them 15 months. I just don't think that makes a big difference, just for the account, okay?
Okay, well, I could go along with that, but I do have a question on number 16, and this is probably for Mr. Pennington. What does a designated non-combustible surface include on number 16?
So that would include things like gravel, asphalt.
Okay, so we don't want too much of that on this project.
We don't want asphalt, but gravel would be a non-combustible.
Okay, and that's going to be, I don't know. I'm, we've been to several of these sites and we've been to the solar farms, visited solar farms. I know we have to have gravel roads going through there, but are you talking about gravel under the panels here?
No. So the fire chief wants a fire break between the semi-maintained grass under the panels and the buffer zone to allow time for the fire rescue department to get there and protect the citizens from a fire that may have started on the facility. So he's asking for a 20-foot fire break of grass maintained less than 6 inches. The grass maintained less than 6 inches didn't sit with some of the solar industry, and so Chief offered other options for this 20-foot fire break, such as vegetation with a lower flame point than traditional grass, or a non-combustible surface such as gravel.
So I'm trying to visualize where this is going. Is this just going around the perimeter?
No, this would be in between the panel and the required buffer that's required by our ordinance.
Okay, the trees.
Right, so we
Well,
require,
that's kind of around the perimeter.
right, most likely it would be inside the fence.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant, inside, the perimeter inside the fence. Okay. I just don't want, the purpose of this is try to maintain farmland. We've got farmers coming to us and they have by rights automatically to build a certain amount of houses. But one way of preserving this property would to be have solar panels set on it, for 30 to 50 years plus. And then, once that rental agreement is done, then it's returned to farmland or timberland or, whatever it's being used for now. And the county could gain millions in revenue, that these companies would pay while those panels are sitting on property, rather than having housing there, which would cause an increase in traffic and cause us have to expand our schools and such. So I just want to make sure that this property is maintained in such a way that it can be returned to timberland and farmland.
Right.
I don't want to see a lot, in other words, I'm saying I don't want to see a lot of artificial stuff on it. I've seen the panels, all of us have been to solar sites. We know the panels can be taken away and the land returned, restored. As a matter of fact, that's what's required by our ordinances.
Yes, and so the chief requested this fire break. The planning department supports the chief in the fire break and protection of our citizens from any fire that may start there. It seems that the most rural preservation character to preserve that would be to plant the riprap and cut it less than 6 inches as originally requested by the chief.
Okay.
The industry wanted other options, so that's where the chief said you can use other vegetation that has a lower flame points in grass if you don't want to cut the grass to 6 inches or less, or you could use a non-combustible surface such as gravel.
Now, if we use gravel or asphalt, what does our ordinance say about when the land has to be restored? Does that gravel or asphalt stay there?
No, that would need to be removed.
Okay, that would have, and that's clear in our ordinance that it has to be. I mean, the gravel might not be such an issue, but asphalt is.
The staff would probably suggest to add to this condition that asphalt be removed as a non-combustible surface.
I think the reality is you're not going to see it. The applicant is not going to want to put in
Money.
thousands of feet of asphalt for an access road. It's going to drive up the cost. It's going to increase impervious area, which means they have to install larger stormwater management facilities. There are cost implications all the way down the line. So I don't think we're going to see asphalt. Even in our ordinance now, a farmer or landowner can request that roads that are built as part of this process be retained and not have to be reclaimed. So part of reclamation process will be working with the landowners to determine what features, what roads that were, built that they want to keep, and what roads to eliminate as part of the reclamation process.
So as part of farmland right now, the farmer can do some paving, you're telling me, and some gravel.
Sure, they can build an access road to on their property to, most of them are dirt roads or paths. But in theory, yes, if they needed to construct a road to get to parts of their facility, of their farm, they certainly could do that.
Okay, all right. My goal would be with these farms is to, keep them as rural looking as possible, because that's the purpose, to maintain for the next 30 to 50 years, this property it will be hidden behind fences and, trees, and it will be maintained and restored to either timber or farmland once the solar farm is no longer there. And so it cannot be developed into housing, correct, during this time?
Yes, that's correct.
So technically, we're delaying too much growth in a certain area. Is one way of looking.
That would be one way to look at it.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, a couple of questions, if I may. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I still got a problem with the roads back in. You barely can pass 2 cars on that road in the back. And I have a concern after the road.
The road where this facility is attempting to be built. Well, I'm not justifying either way, that facility. What I'm saying to you is right now, that family is now cutting down trees and rolling those big trucks out every day. That's all I can tell you. Do I know how it works, Priscilla? I have no idea. Okay. But I'm just telling you, when I went by, we looked at the different locations. There are a lot of entrances that are going to be there. But the man who's presently there, yes or no, so it has nothing to do with it, okay? It's just that's what I saw there. In fact, the one time when we went, we had to back out because he had one of his big trucks coming out of that space. So that's all I can say about when it comes to roadways. I'm not playing an expert in the field. I'm just saying that's what exists now.
I do have a concern about the traffic too, but like you said, there are a lot of logging trucks there already. I have a bigger concern about the traffic if houses start going up on this property. And I'd like to see that delayed and kept rural as long as possible. So anyway you look at it, I think we're going to have traffic there. With the solar farm, I'm seeing that as temporary traffic. For longer for this large project here, a year and a half or beyond. How many acres is this one again?
16 acres.
It's 1,682 acres and approximately 690 acres of panels.
And it's, in how many sections? Do you remember, Mr. Pennington? Some on this side of the road, some on the other side.
Yeah, there's some on each side of the road there, and it's not split into sections. And so I couldn't tell you the number of pods off the top of my head.
Okay.
To clarify for the record, question, Seth, is it 1682 with or without the 20 acres that were the subject for rezoning?
That would be with the 20 acres.
Okay, so based on your prior recommendation, you're looking at 1662.
1662, and about half of that, I think, is in panels. And the rest is border, and there's wetland that can't be used, etc. So about half in panels.
And since we've already turned down the RC06, we would have to change this SPEX 04 to eliminate those two lots. Which in that thing it's included.
That's what, and that we're clarifying for the record, yeah. And I think your recommendation will be clear on that,
Okay.
based on what we've just
So
discussed.
those two lots, if we determine that this should go on with a motion to approve, then those two lots will come out of this.
Correct, they are not eligible for this special exception.
Honest. Okay, so, and the other thing is, my suggestion for the 8 to 5, how do we handle that?
We just clarified, whenever you make a motion, we clarify that the motion is on the conditions as presented by planning staff, subject to the amendment that you stated on the record relating to condition number 7.
All right, any other questions? Rochelle, any questions? I mean, I know what you said. Any other real questions that you'd like to? Bob? All right, so I'm going to ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion concerning condition 7, that the Monday through Friday hours be amended from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Do I have a second?
Do we need that?
No,
I don't
we
think
don't
we
need
need
that as a
that.
separate motion.
Yeah.
We can just say, if you want to make a motion, whether you make a motion to approve or deny, subject to the conditions presented by staff with that to number 7.
And minus the 20-acre rezoning.
Now we need a motion on SPEX 04 2021. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to have what I'm going to try to be brief discussion on this matter.
Okay.
We're talking 1,662 acres. Beautiful. Caroline County, like rolling hills, timber. Of course, Caroline, we are agricultural, timbering, peaceful, and quiet county. That's why we live here. We, the citizens, like it that way. We have areas set aside for commerce and industry. We have our beautiful farms and our timber. We make our homes here because of those facts. We like our rural areas. We make our homes as attractive as possible, and we spend time and effort to do this. Now we have Virginia Clean Energy. I tried dissecting this a bit. I came to what I think is a good conclusion. Virginia Clean Energy Act is a spinoff of the Green New Deal being touted by some idiots, and I said idiots, in Washington, D.C. The solar industry is just that, a business. What is the best way to promote your business? Legislate it. Make it mandatory. So as a business, you hire professional lobbyists, or you lobby a legislature yourself and have laws passed. No offense to Mr. McKenzie or Mr. Bauer or any other attorney that may be present. I like you both, okay? But this is the Virginia Clean Energy Act. I've read it. There is absolutely nothing in this act that compels Caroline County to have solar facilities. Nothing. It is filled with loopholes and credits and purchasing and, yeah. In 1971, I had a felony drug case that I arrested an individual on. I lost the case because of a technicality, a loophole. And I asked the defense attorney afterwards, who was a member of the legislature, why do y'all pass laws that have loopholes? And he made a light bulb. He said to me, who passes the laws? Well, my answer was the state legislature. He said, who comprises the state legislature? He said, no. I said, well. He said, you don't think, and I remember this the day I got, you don't think we're going to pass a law that we can't find a loophole? That individual was the Honorable Douglas Wilder. So he taught me a lesson. 34 pages for the Virginia Clean Energy Act. If anyone would like to read it. So we now have solar developers approaching us, extolling all of the virtues and advantages of solar power. Bear in mind, and these are good people, I'm not saying anything negative about them. They're business people, but they're salespeople, and they're promoting their product. They promote it first by waiving dollars to the landowners and to the local government. That's why we're having the $1 million in revenue sharing, waiving the dollars in front of our eyes. They further proclaim what they do will not impact the land, wildlife, or property value. I beg to differ on that because common sense dictates. They state the solar sites would be barely or not visible at all to passing traffic or the citizens of the community. One profit they make is the planting of trees and bushes along the roadway. Well, I guess it's okay if the residents in the area to wait 5 years for these trees and shrubs to grow up to where they are totally obstructing the view. There's a decommissioning plan. And we have found from statements made by some of the representatives that these leases are going to run 25 to 35 years. They can sell the lease, or it can be renewed at the end of its term. So let's be honest, once they're in, they're not. Sorry to be so winded, but I have thought about this long and hard. I've even had dreams about it. Now there's a total megawatt capacity set for our county. But you can rest assured that once that capacity is reached, the solar industry is going to ask for change to raise that limit. They're going to take as much land as they can. Keep in mind, We have an obligation to Caroline County and to our fellow citizens to do what is in the best interest of our county. These solar facilities do not put food on our table. Farmers of America do. We cannot chip away our agricultural preservation land so that concrete jungles like cities can have electricity. As an example, the city of Richmond is getting ready to build a multi-million-dollar gambling casino and resort. But as one of their profits, they're setting aside 55 acres of green space park. Well, I've got news for the city of Richmond. Why don't you take those 55 acres and put them in solar panels? For our zoning ordinance, I'm going to the agricultural preservation and the statement of intent. Section 1. This district is intended to encourage economic development and to preserve farmland by providing for the viability of the county's agricultural section by encouraging the orderly and responsible growth of its livestock, dairy, and poultry industry. Where permitted by the zoning ordinance, agricultural production activities, including but not limited to tillage, crop production, harvesting, raising, and pasturing of animals, and intensive agricultural operations shall be permitted uses as a matter of right, subject to the standards contained herein. The regulations for this district are further designed to accommodate related activities, but only to the extent that they serve agricultural, forestry, or similar rural economic functions. It is further recognized that certain agricultural activities and certain non-agricultural activity uses suitable for agricultural areas can adversely affect other existing or anticipated development or uses. This district provides for the orderly development of such uses in appropriate areas to reduce the conflicts inherent with incompatible uses. That's straight out of our book. Let's look at briefly the verbiage that we have to use. I can find nowhere that the public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practices warrants the approval of this request. Is that? We've heard and read comments from our citizens and residents of proposed sites, and we can't just dismiss those feelings. The idea these sites probably will not be visible doesn't change the fact that it's there. The same as if it was a nuclear waste dump site, but you can't see it. These sites are akin to pimples on a prom queen's face. And I think to be so blunt, but I'll let that out. I've heard our citizens and neighbors, and I ask myself, what is it going to cost me, and what am I going to pay, and am I going to pay the price? Well, I can see what the cost is. I'm not going to be blinded by the dollar signs of revenue sharing, and I'm not willing to pay the price. Caroline County and our way of life is not for sale. We will not contribute, I will not contribute to the rape of our county, and I will not be blinded by the dollar sign. Thank you. I am finished.
Well,
Mr. Weaver, I'll respond to that. I don't have a prepared speech. All I can say is My family has been in this county since this was a county. We farmed this land, and I want it to stay rural, and I want to protect it. But common sense tells me that if I can't figure out a way to keep this land rural, then I know farmers are going to build houses on it. There's going to be houses there probably within 50 years. It's probably not going to affect most of us. But we cannot, by law, stop them from putting something on that land. Once the houses get there, then people from outside the county, currently living outside of Caroline, will move there. And they'll demand more services. And they'll want more schools. In regard to the companies coming before us and waiving dollars, that's what everyone does when they make an application to the county. You know, they waive dollars in front of our face and say, you know, we want to do this and it's going to be a benefit to the county. So at this point, we are at a crossroads of starting to face the lesser of the evils, you know. We can deny these. I mean, they are coming at us all of a sudden. But if we do, we will lose this farmland. With common sense tells me we will lose this farmland within 50 years. There'll be houses there. I live on a farm in Caroline. I have a farm on either side of me. I want it to stay there. But if one of the neighboring farmers came to me and said, I'm either going to put my by rights houses here, or I'm going to hide some solar panels behind trees, I would pick the solar panels. Because I know that my area would stay quiet for the next 50 years. And I'm probably not going to be in the next 50 years. But I want that farm to go to my kids. And I don't want Caroline to stay rural. So that's where we have. We're at the crossroads where we got to pick the lesser of the evils for the good of the county. Can't force farmers to be farmers if they don't want to be farmers anymore. And that's where it's coming to.
Dr. Horton, you're absolutely correct. And I will say this. I live on farmland, been in our family since the late 1690s. And believe me, I would much rather see homes go in rather than solar panels. Just my opinion.
Just a difference of opinion.
Tell me, I wish to say something. I mean, right now, I can speak honestly, right? Allowed to speak.
Yeah.
Well, right now, I think Priscilla's leaning in Bob's direction. I think I'm leaning in Carol's direction. You both. Now, how do we handle this? Mr. Attorney, sir.
Someone makes a motion, either a motion to approve or a motion to deny. And you vote on the motion. And you need a majority to pass the motion. We have a quorum tonight, but it's 4 of our 6 members. So certainly could result in a split vote. If the motion results in a split vote, it fails because you don't have a majority to pass it. You have not passed. You can keep trying to make motions to approve or deny, and if they keep being split, they don't pass. You can either then you can make a motion to defer to see what would happen when you have more members in attendance. Otherwise, if you have a motion that results in a tie, the matter is passed up to the board with no recommendation. Make sure I got that right according to Mr. Finch.
Yeah, and I would suggest you also have the option of actually making a motion to forward it to the board with no recommendation.
You can do that as well.
That sounds like, well, I'm feeling like Carol is, and I understand where both sides are coming. We've been on this board long enough, we understand what each one was saying. I just think that we work pretty well together as a board. And I think the right thing to do is just what was decided to discuss by Mr. Fincham. To send it on to the board of supervisors with no recommendation. Let them make a decision.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to disagree with you, but I think you should at least go through the effort of making a motion either in favor of, to recommend approval or denial. And again, if that motion fails, then make the motion to forward it with no recommendation. Even though we think we know where this is going.
Okay. And I would say, Mr. Schwartz, make a motion, please.
Just to clarify for the planning commission, so you understand, one of the issues there is, the discussions inform the public, understand, so they can understand the basis for your votes. But the planning commission does not speak or act until it has made a motion and approved it. So it is the only way we get something for the board to rely on is when you pass a motion, which is why it's important to make them.
Okay, so what, basically, sorry guys, this is an experience for all of us, okay? So right now, if Bob makes a motion and it comes out 2-2, and then Carol makes a motion and it comes out 2-2, then we can send it on to the board.
I don't think we have to make two motions.
It's entirely up to you. It's entirely up to you.
No, I just
We can make one motion if it's tied, then that's how we pass it on to the board of supervisors.
Mr. Schwartz, I mean, just so you understand, we're all on the same page. We worked really hard to get through this stuff. And this is a real issue, so I appreciate your whole statement. But, I mean, I understand where Carol's coming from, and that worries me also, okay? Being a builder and a developer, I don't want to see every corner with another house on it, or another school, or another bus stop. I'm being honest with you. So, Mr. Schwartz, the floor is yours.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, where a special exemption request SPEX 04-2020 for CC Solar appears to be generally inconsistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And whereas the public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practices warrants the denial of this request, I recommend that SPEX 04-2020 be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of denial.
Second. Have a second. Now what, Mr. Attorney?
See who's the
All
correct.
good.
Take a vote now. Okay, so I vote no.
And we can do a roll call vote if you want, or we can, yeah.
Roll call vote is fine. I vote no.
No,
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, have we covered all bases now, sir? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, and again, it is up to the planning commission. There are no requirements as to how many different types of motions you need to make. We just wanted you to understand that the only way you speak is through your motion. So you now have called a motion to deny. That motion has tied, which means that it did not pass. So as of right now, if you don't take any further action, it will go by default to the board with no recommendation. You could make a motion to defer, or you could make a motion to send it on to the board with no recommendation, or you could make a motion to approve, but, as Mr. Weaver said, I think
Well,
it's highly likely we know how that will go.
I would like to make a motion that we send this on to the Board of Supervisors with no recommendation.
Second.
I mean, do we really need that?
You don't need it, but you can certainly make it.
I mean, because it's going as no recommendation right now.
And I think we have a motion in a second, so it's ready, it is ready for a vote.
Okay,
Okay. Move on to the Board of Supervisors with recommendation. I'm sorry, Chris, this is new to all of us.
So we've got that, the motion to forward with no recommendation from Mr. Weaver, seconded by Mr. Schwartz. So now you can call a vote, you can do roll call vote, or you can do it like you normally do it, all in favor.
But send it on to the board of supervisors without a recommendation.
We gotta vote.
We're gonna vote? You okay with that?
So I think, yeah, we need.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
So we got another one.
I need a break.
Do we need a motion for a break?
We can just, yeah, make a motion to get,
Yeah,
Take a
I make a motion to take a 5-minute break.
you do need a vote on it. All in favor?
Yes, in favor.
than about the last vote. So, like I said before you voted, we have a quorum tonight, but just barely 4 of our 6 members. And Dr. Horton abstained from the vote. So because she abstained from participating, we didn't have a quorum on that vote. We had 3 of 6 voting. So that vote also failed. So to recap, you had a tie vote on the motion to deny, and so that fails. Your motion to forward it with no recommendation also failed for lack of a quorum, because only 3 of your 6 total members voted. So right now you have no vote. And if you are unable to pass a vote under your rules, it by default goes to the board with no recommendation. So you could call another vote, motion to defer, or you could leave it as is, or you could make any other motion that you feel appropriate. But we're going through a lot of interesting procedural issues tonight, and that's where we stand right now.
So if Dr. Horton changes her vote, then that would go through to the Board of Supervisors. Carol, would you like to change your vote? She wants to abstain.
No, because it's going forward anyway with no recommendation. So I think we're all good with that.
That's fine, except it's a no vote, which is like, there's only 4 seats.
So right, what you have a tie vote on is the motion to deny. So your rules say in the event of a tie vote, case will be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with no recommendation. You have a tie vote, so this SPX is going to, as it stands right now, unless you take further action, it's going by default under your rules to the board with no recommendation.
And the result will be the same.
The end result is the same. We've done that before. We've sent them tie votes before.
Just want to make sure.
So I think we're good with that.
The only other vote, I said this already once, but to clarify, you can vote to approve, vote to deny, vote to move with no recommendation, or vote to defer to your next meeting when you have a different slate of members potentially present.
I don't think, in all honesty, we've been together for more than a year, okay? I don't think postponing it, okay, is going to change the vote, because I know both of those people. I think the vote would still come out exactly like that. So I'm going to let it go the way it is, if it's okay with the rest of us. You want to agree?
That's where we leave that. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have to call the meeting back to order?
Yeah, we know we have reconvened.
Okay, we reconvened to review SPEX 05-2021, Racehorse Solar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of the conditions are the same for Racehorse Solar as the previous one, so I'm just going to touch on the conditions that are different. Condition number 4, the GDP is specific to this project. Condition number 5, the rated nameplate capacity shall be 12 megawatts AC. And condition number 11 has been stricken, and this is a minor facility. And so no aerial photography would be required on a minor facility as the acreage is significantly smaller.
Which condition was that? I'm sorry.
Number 11.
Oh, you struck that. Okay.
Yes.
I have some questions, Mr. Chairman.
Please, by all means.
I don't understand number 5, the number.
So
Was that a typo?
the previous one was 150 megawatts, and this one is 12 megawatts.
Okay, so you mean the previous,
The previous
one we
application-
were voting?
previous
Yeah,
application
okay, that was just a typo as well. Okay,
was 12 megawatts for this.
okay. So, Mr. Weaver, did you have a question about number 7 on this one?
Well, I have the same question I had on the last application, number 7, is I would like the hours to be as previously described. Now I have to figure out where to put it, in all these piles. I would like the hours of construction to be from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Saturday, and no work unless an emergency on Sunday. That's what I had in the other one. Okay. Sounds safe. Right, should we make a motion?
Well, I have some thoughts on this one before we do. Okay. I mean, there are some concerns here. This was the one it's not too far from homes. It's not rural like the other two. However, at the same time, common sense tells me, I mean, this is within a mile and a half of Route 1, 95 area. This area is probably gonna be developed. Housing and probably businesses. People that live on Western Caroline, you know, love the county, but a lot of them moved here from other places, and they enjoy being closer to houses and businesses. So we just have to decide, do we want to preserve this property, which a solar farm would, for up to 50 years or so, or, you know, it will probably end up in housing and probably a lot of traffic and light pollution in that area over the next 50 years. Now, then again, it's probably not going to affect most of us sitting in the audience, but it is going to affect my children and grandchildren. So that's what we're thinking about here. By rights, this property can have some houses on it.
Well, my issue with this is that I worry very much about what I call smaller pieces of land being in these residential neighborhoods. It worries me. I mean, I look at some of the acreage that we're dealing with, and I'm like, okay. Resources, whatever, 52 acres of solar equipment. Whalebone is 12 and a half of solar panels. I'm just concerned with putting these facilities in residential neighborhoods. I mean, although I listened to the situation that Bob discussed in reference to these pieces of property later on down the line. And I guess one of the reasons I was like okay with the larger development was the mere fact that I felt that it was far enough away from the communities. Whereas I look at these two, well, okay, we'll take one at a time. I guess you can't do both, I'm sorry. We'll look at the racehorse, okay? It's very, very close to Route 1. And I think it's a minor project in what I would consider to be a residential area. That's my feeling.
And I think that's what we're thinking about here, because it's gonna end up as something, common sense tells you it's likely gonna end up as something within the next 50 years, which seems like a long time, but then again, it's not. So it's just a matter of what's gonna go there. Housing, it's a rural road still. Housing, with traffic. And which means it's probably gonna be some businesses in that area. It's really close to, development. So it's just a matter of, there is a petition, this is the one that was big petition on, right? Against it, that is. And most of the solar panels are hidden. There is a place along the road that they're going to have to put some major tree line to hide it from the houses that are across the road.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
I would agree with Dr. Horton that eventually houses could be built on this land or any of the land that is being proposed. We do not know when or if that will ever happen. We do know for a fact that if we pass these requests, what's going in, we know for a fact it's something we will not be able to get rid of. And for the record, I'm not going to read it, but I encourage everyone to refresh Rural Preservation District Statement of Intent. And this land is rural preservation. And to make it easier for everyone, I would just restate my previous position on the solar industry's request. Not only was it applicable, in my opinion, to that special exemption request, but for this one and the next one to follow. And that's just my position. Eventually, in some year, there will be a continuous city floating along the eastern seaboard from Key West all the way up to Maine. It's like traveling in Miami area now. You never know when you go from one city to the other unless you see a sign. So there's going to be a megalopolis going up and down the eastern seaboard. But that's way off in the future. But we know what we're dealing with now. We know what we'll be dealing with if these proposals go forward.
It appears as if Mr. Schwartz is in the same opinion as he was on the last solar project. So I think at this particular stage, I'll ask for a motion.
Whereas the public necessary, convenience, general welfare, good on the practice, wants and now this request, I recommend that SPEX -05 -2021 be forward to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of denial.
Second.
Ms. Beck, you wanted to go through roll call vote?
Mr. Schwartz? How do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Minor, how do you vote? Mr. Weaver?
Nay.
Dr. Horton,
Nay.
we have a tie vote.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we forward this to the Board of Supervisors with a no recommendation.
Second.
Do it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
That makes this
Same thing, or, I mean, the same thing as a tie.
it's actually a no.
That's
no
without,
vote, so it would
without,
go
with
with
three
the
voting,
recommendation.
without Dr. Horton voting on a motion,
Yeah.
you don't have a quorum.
So therefore it's a no vote.
That's, yeah, you don't have that.
But I mean, it's,
So
we
you
don't have a recommendation anyway,
Right.
so.
So if you decide to conclude this case with a tie vote, then it's forwarded with no recommendation by default.
Well, then, forwarded. Thank you. Sorry, Lisa. All right, let's move on. Is that correct? Mr. Attorney, I can move on.
Okay.
Let's move on to XPEX 06-2021. Staff, please.
Mr. Chairman, the conditions for whalebone are exactly the same as racehorse, with the exception of number 5, the rated nameplate capacity shall be 3 megawatts AC.
And can we still change 7 to the hours that I had on the last two, please?
You can change the hours, however, if it goes with no recommendation, the hours don't change, because you're not recommending approval or denial. And so you can change the hours again, but if it ends up the same way, then they're not being changed.
Right, so one way that you could put that into the record, Mr. Weaver, is by making a motion to approve with the conditions suggested and putting that to a vote. It would likely suffer the same fate, but what Mr. Pennington is saying is the conditions are only relevant to a motion to approve because you're making the approval with the condition.
I think this is a waste of time and energy, so let it go the way it is.
Well, I'd like to make a comment on this whalebone, just so the commissioners are aware. The property is grandfathered so that the lots will be smaller here. So, if we don't approve a solar farm here, there will be eventually, I'm guessing, a small subdivision here. Well, actually, my intuition tells me there will be. I mean, it's not that far from my farm. And I mean, I know I want to preserve this county's role as much as anyone else, maybe even more. You know, I was the one that came to public hearings for many years to try to stop fracking, gravel mine, things like that. If we don't figure out a way to stop the housing, too many houses being built, I mean, we're really, you said we can't tell the future. No, we can't tell the future, but common sense tells us, just like you said, Bob, there's going to be, if we don't preserve it, there's going to be housing up and down, you know, the major roadways, and then it's going to branch out. And we're making this, and by saying, well, we're not going to do anything with this land, we're making the same decisions as Pennsylvania made. You know, they said, oh, we're going to keep it rural. Well, they couldn't stop the houses from coming in. And houses don't really bring us a lot of revenue, you know, for our school. Think about what happens every spring. The schools are one of the major groups that comes in here and asks us for money. And every year, you know, we tell the Board of Supervisors, we want them to have more money. And then there's a lack of money because, you know, our population is much smaller than surrounding counties. And, you know, the schools get something, but they don't get what they need probably. So, I mean, I don't want to see it, but I want if we could delay any building on the land, or what is the rental on this one, Mr. Pennington? 50 years they want? What's the contract?
The ordinance allows for 35 years with 2 5-year extensions.
Okay, so 45 years possibly. I don't know what the Board of Supervisors will say, but I would just like to see somehow we keep this land, or any of this land, from being developed for 45 years. Maybe things will be different in 45 years, Maybe people will go elsewhere. But right now, they're knocking at Caroline's door, wanting to build houses. And maybe that's what the people of Caroline want. But I'm being told they don't. They want something that'll keep the land rural. That's what my, constituents, most of them been saying, not all.
I can see what you're saying, but, we have to listen to people, Carolina County too, the district, you, Bob, and myself, have to listen to them. And make the right choice for Carolina County. We are doing the best we can to make the right decision.
Now, we have to make decisions based on what we think is best for the county and what we think, is good for the greater majority. And the majority didn't want those gravel mines along Rappahannock River either, but they're there. So, and that land can't be repaired ever. And now, some of it's got houses on top of it. Some of it doesn't. So it's just something to think about.
Motion, gentlemen? Ladies?
Mr. Chairman, we're at special exemption request. That's PDX 06/2021. For Whalebone Solar appears to be generally inconsistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And whereas the public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practices warrants the denial of this request. I recommend that SPEX 06/2021 be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of denial.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Schwartz? How do you vote?
Yes.
Reminder, Mr. Weaver?
No.
Dr. Horton?
No.
I vote. You can either make another motion to send to the board with no recommendation, or let it go as that.
Mr. Chairman, I so move it be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with no recommendation.
Second.
Mr. Schwartz, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Biner? Mr. Weaver?
Now, we're voting on to send this on to the
With no recommendation.
recommendation. Yes.
Dr. Horton?
Abstain.
So it will go with no recommendation.
But by default, not by action.
Okay.
We have any and all matters, executive?
No.
No?
No, sir, we have none.
Then I have a motion to dismiss this.
So just so the public knows, none of these pass.
Right, so what you do is make recommendations to the board on these applications, and you have not made any recommendations tonight.
Correct.
And you have concluded your review of these 4 applications. They're going to the board with no recommendation from the planning.
Except for the first one,
I'm
the
sorry, the first one.
rezoning is denied,
Yes, sorry.
and the solar farms are, nothing passed.
Have a motion to adjourn, please.
I move that we adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.